Welcome back to another episode of Heart to Heart. I'm Dr. Columbus Batiste, and I'm here to have conversations that can heal a stressed and broken heart. For those of you who don't know, I'm an interventional cardiologist, a lifestyle advocate, and I'll tell you, I'm so excited to be with you today. And we're going to jump at it. This time, I'll tell you, you have me solo. There's no other guest. It's just me. It's a heart to heart. It's me, my heart to yours. And I'll tell you, this is a month of gratitude, and I have so much to be grateful for. But on this particular episode, this being November, Diabetes Awareness Month, Alzheimer's Awareness Month, I'm choosing to really try and focus my attention on on diabetes. And, one of the things that we're going to look to do is we're going to look to have a firm discussion. Now, what you see up here is I want you to like and follow me at Healthy Heart Doc on Instagram and on Facebook, and you'll see this QR code. You're welcome to scan it, and we'll talk about that more, about my upcoming book, Selfish, A Cure for a Stressed and Broken Heart. And this is going to be the theme for today's discussion, really as it relates to what? Diabetes. So let's dig into this. Some of you may or may not be aware, but I went on this journey. This is me many, many, many moons ago with my dad, right? It's my first hero, my superhero, my father, Columbus Sr. And, I grew up watching him insulin and insulin syringes, and that was just part of the normal daily life with him. I remember looking at his hands and seeing like the loss of the muscle from the peripheral neuropathy. I saw all those things that were there on a regular basis with him, and it really truly made me aware of diabetes. And as I went through med school, I realized the fact that his health continued to just decline. And it was to the point where he ended up passing away as a result of the complications of diabetes. And that was a really earmarked time in my life. It made me shift and move over to a different zone in terms of the way in which I deliver care. And this is really the scenario. I thought that I was destined to live sicker and sooner, just like my dad, until I uncovered the fact that I wasn't alone. What I realized quickly is the fact that diabetes is rampant. Throughout the entirety of the world, we see over 700 million individuals have diabetes, is estimated by 2045. We're seeing that really, here's a key. Every 17 seconds, an American is diagnosed with diabetes, right? This is what the Journal of Managed Care told us back in 2018. We're seeing the rise that's there. We're seeing this really as it relates to the total population, continues to develop this inflammatory complex scenario that's there. It's as if something's in the air or in the water. We see that this is more common as we get to be older, and age 45 and older, compared to younger populations. We're seeing this, that 1 out of every 4 healthcare dollars. We talk about what is the healthcare crises. Diabetes is the root cause. But we say, well, what's a cardiologist talking about? Something that's an endocrinology type of problem, which means the study of hormones, as diabetes is a relationship with hormones. It's because diabetes is truly a vascular disease. And what we know is that adults with diabetes have roughly 2 to 3-fold increased risk of heart attacks and strokes compared to someone who doesn't have diabetes. That's why it's so significant. We know that diabetes, that it remains as a much higher rate in the United States compared to other comparable countries, which means countries of wealth, of means, who should be able to do better. That we still are amongst those who have the highest burden of disease is what the studies are telling us. But here's the most troubling part, especially being a father of a soon-to-be 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. We're seeing that the trends of diabetes is increasing in our young adults, our youth. As a kid growing up, it was always called juvenile onset and adult onset diabetes. Those terms are essentially gone. Now, what we know is these rates are increasing, but they're increasing in segments of our population at greatest degree of risk. Those are minority and ethnic groups, which is why this predicted the increased cardiovascular burden in many of those groups. And we see inside of the Black and and Hispanic groups, we're seeing the higher than average rates of being diagnosed with diabetes. This is troubling. This is troubling. When we look at the burden of healthcare expenditures, African Americans are 4 times more likely than those of Caucasian descent to have complications of diabetes, meaning amputations where because of lack of blood flow. Remember, I told you it's vascular disease. it ends up in resulting in having to have an amputation. The question is why? Why has this happened? Why is America having the increased rates as we reflect in this November? Well, many of my conversations, I talk about the burden of stress, something we all can relate to. This idea of stress, where it's a sequence of our demands minus resources, is what this equation is. And studies have told us that increased burden of psychological stress, there almost is no other type, right? It's in our mind. It mobilizes this biological response that's implicated in type 2 diabetes, including the release of blood sugar, glucose, and lipids into the circulation, leading to this inflammatory cytokine expression with increased blood pressure. There's no doubt that our mindset can really predict the occurrence of these ill effects that are on us, that repeated or sustained stress exposure leads to this chronic allostatic load. So what that means is this burden as your body is trying to withstand this idea of stress that leads to dysregulation of glucose metabolism. What that means in simple layman's terms, your body can no longer handle it. And this neuroendocrine function and low inflammatory state continues to persist, and it's comparable to the cortisol release. And we see this over and over. We're seeing too as well that we're seeing that this idea of workplace stress, this stress from work and finances that leads to or increased risk of type 2 diabetes. That when we're stressed, right, and we're trying to figure out what is the health behaviors, our behaviors seem to shift. We tend to be unsure of what to do in terms of our food choices, our choice to move less, right? And adherence to medication also contributes to type 2 diabetes. It led one environmental, this professor of kinesiology, Rebecca Hansen, who was director of childhood disparities and research center at the University of Michigan. What she said is we think environmental stress around us, right? And the effect it has on your biology and behavior is a key factor or determinant in some of the differences in disease states we see. She was reflecting on this impact that happens that leads inside of areas of social economic stress, this increased burden. And so this is why studies have told us that perceived stress increases the risk of diabetes. They've told us that as you're trying to move up this ladder, depending on where you're at on socioeconomic ladder, you know what I mean, whether or not you're able to drive a Bentley versus if you have to drive a Honda Civic, not by choice, but without necessity, right? That if you're able to go to Harvard versus if you have to go to a community college, not because of choice, but by necessity or lack of resources. That when you look at income, education, occupation, it shows a graded association with diabetes and complications, meaning that the lower you are socioeconomically, the greater your risk for chronic disease, specifically type 2 diabetes. It tells us that our health equals resiliency divided by stress. This stress can be financial, it can be environmental. The higher our stress, the poorer our health. And what do many of us do when we get faced with stress? We simply turn to those comfort foods because we understand that stress is simply dessert spelled backwards. And this is a component of what I characterize as nutritional stress. We understand nutritional stress, yes, indeed, is eating disease-forming foods, but it's also not eating health-promoting foods. It's what we understand. And so when we look at studies, this is where Lancet told us in this landmark study, told us that poor dietary choices, a major risk factor for deaths in the majority of countries across the world, attributing to diabetes, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular events. But here's the thing. When you start really parsing through more of the data, it told us, Gabriel and colleagues told us to examine neighborhoods, social, physical environments. Remember? And type 2 diabetes, they looked specifically at African Americans in the Jackson Heart Study based out of Jackson, Mississippi. And they found that higher density of what we now know is called food swamps, higher unfavorable food stores was associated with increase by 34% in type 2 diabetes. We also know that eating fast food 2 or more times a week increases the risk by 27% for type 2 diabetes. Other studies told us that the fact that consumption of these quick serve foods, whether or not it's hamburgers or fried chicken, fried fish, and Chinese food, right, were independently associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes. These are the things, the substance that chronic disease is made of. And that this incidence ratio for greater than 2 meals per week, increase your risk by 40%. Right, for hamburgers. But here's the thing: for people who say, well, I'm not eating red meat, I'm eating just chicken, fried chicken. 68% for fried chicken is what this study told us, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. All right, so there's significant risks that are there. You say, well, okay, I just grill a little bit at home. And for those people out there who are not plant-based, and this study published back in Diabetes Care through Harvard, it basically told us that high heat cooking methods such as broiling, barbecuing, grilling, roasting, deep frying that turkey, right? Instead of sparing that life of the sentient being, these to prepare beef and chicken increases the risk, right? After of type 2 diabetes is what we see on a regular basis. So another study in 2019 told us the fact that in a mere 10% increase of ultra-processed foods in your diet is linked to 15% higher chance of developing type 2 diabetes. What about sugar, sweetened beverages? This other study at Annals of Internal Medicine told us that after adjusting for confounding variables, including dietary factors, the incidence, which means the likelihood of developing it, for two or more developing diabetes was 24% higher for individuals who drank 2 or more soft drinks per day. That's common. That's common. So when growing up, I used to drink a lot of the soft drinks, but yet I was somehow thinking that it was my destiny to develop diabetes. And the question was it truly my destiny, or was it really a matter of fact of my lifestyle, my habits that were playing a role? When you look at large scale studies like the Adventist Health Study, what they demonstrated is the fact that the increased burden and risk of animal protein associated with insulin resistance, right? And this is one of the things that leads to diabetes. When we look at, well, how do these things, eating these fried foods and fast foods, really lead to this? What studies are telling us, this wonderful study out of the University of California, my home state, San Diego, told us the possible correlation between a high calorie fast food breakfast and developing a leaky gut syndrome, disrupting the lining of the colon, the intestines, and leading to inflammatory states that lead to diabetes. We know too as well about the increased intracellular lipids, all right, that leads to the association not only with obesity, but also with insulin resistance. Back to that insulin resistance, still everything is starting to roll together as we're seeing this blockage of the ability of insulin from being able to work because of the clogging of the cells. This is leading to a lot of the issues in the development of diabetes. That saturated fat, which we predominantly get from animal proteins, readily gets into our cells and can block the glucose, contributing to this insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. And so what the authors recognize that people who eat animal proteins have higher levels of intracellular lipids. And this saturated fat is one of the main drivers of insulin resistance. You also can't avoid something called advanced glycation end products. It's this bridging, right, of your protein and your sugars that happens under high heat from animal proteins. And you see, when you cook this, you tend to, especially at very high and dry heats, this triggers this oxidative stress. Remember, health equals resiliency divided by stress. Your nutrition can add to that stress, and it forms this oxidative stress and inflammation that contributes to insulin resistance. And this has been associated with diabetes, November Awareness Month, Alzheimer's, November Awareness Month, and cardiovascular disease. It should be every month, right? As well as aging. We also know another area is from the form of nitrates. And these are commonly used as preservatives in meat products, especially your processed meats like sausages, hot dogs, and other cured meats. And that these meats contain 50% more nitrates than unprocessed meats. These are converted to something called nitrosamines in meat, which generate free radicals. These are the things that attack the body, right? That you need antioxidants to help resist and offset things. And this leads to oxidative stress, inflammation, and insulin resistance. So we're starting to get a picture, but we look also here. Now, Iron Man is a good thing, but heme iron is not, right? We love Iron Man, but we don't love heme iron. Heme iron, it's found in animal meat. Non-heme iron is found in plant source meats, right? And so this heme iron, it's another form of a pro-oxidant, which means that it triggers free radicals, another form of stress on the body and inflammation. This interferes with the storage of blood sugar in the and causes the liver to release glucose or blood sugar into the blood. And this is indeed what contributes to these higher levels that lead to problems inside. So we understand this. We understand that dietary protein is associated with insulin. High intake of dietary animal protein, and it's been shown to reduce the insulin sensitivity by as much as 25%. We understand that there's things called endocrine disrupting chemicals and these chemicals are commonly found in meat sources, animal sources, and they've been shown to disrupt our endocrine system, our function. This is our hormonal system that causes insulin resistance and impaired beta cell function. What's the cause of diabetes? We're seeing it. It's starting to uncover as I'm presenting this information. And so as I uncover this, I realize that, listen, my DNA is not my destiny. And what I realized quickly is the fact that, guess what? I need to get selfish. Selfish in order to, as I say inside the book, a cure for a stressed and broken heart. But we're saying in order to prevent and reverse diabetes, if I get selfish. So what do you mean by that, Doc? The S in selfish stands for spiritual. Not necessarily religious, but level of mindfulness. It can be in terms of prayer and meditation and deep breathing. We look at the E for exercise, the L for love, forgiveness, gratitude, the release of oxytocin. F for food, real food, whole food, plant-rich food. The intimacy of relationships is the I. The S for sleep or rest, and the H for humor. For humor, we look at spiritual. Where the studies tell us about that. When we look at randomized controlled trials, which means they group patients into two groups, one in which they apply therapy, the other they don't, and watch what happens. And they looked at transcendental meditation components of the components of metabolic syndrome in patients with coronary disease, and they found improved plasma glucose and insulin levels were observed in those who underwent the mindfulness versus just the health education alone. And that was statistically significant. It tells us we understand that our prefrontal cortex, this area of our brain here, is our reasoning portion. And by meditating in prayer, what that does, it increases the thickness that allows us to be able to make rational thoughts and to be able to make our plans and follow through with them. There's power in taking time away, lowering, reducing the level of stress hormones that are there. What's another area? We look at exercise, the E for exercise. Now we know there's power that's there. Studies have told us beyond belief that exercise improves blood sugar control in type 2 diabetes, reducing the risk factors, helps with weight loss. All these things are powerful. We look at when you do a combination of aerobic plus resistance. I'll tell you, resistance training is important as we grow more mature in years lived because we have a tendency to lose our muscle mass. And so as we engage in this, it increases our basal metabolic rate, helps us to metabolize. And that's why studies have shown that improve in hemoglobin A1C, which is a reflection of how many of your red blood cells have basically become sugar oxidized or crystallized inside of the bloodstream that's there. But here's the thing, you don't have to do all the crazy stuff. You don't have to go on Peloton, you don't have to do CrossFit. You can simply walk. Just simply walk. And this study looked at individuals, the effectiveness of 3 15-minute bouts of walking after eating compared to sustained, and showing that short intermittent bouts of post-meal walking are an effective way of controlling. It is the cheat code. Simply get out there and move. Some studies have shown that as few as 2 minutes can help lower the blood sugar levels. We look at the other thing I love to talk about is getting neat with it. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That means standing, taking the stairs, parking further away, climbing, doing whatever you have to, vacuuming. All those things are powerful in terms of improving the insulin sensitivity, decreasing your weight circumference, and improving your overall well-being. That when you engage in this is why studies have shown in comparison lifestyle compared to a medication that's commonly used called metformin showed a decrease in the incidence of diabetes. And this wasn't even looking at adoption of a full whole food plant-based diet. Imagine what would happen if we adopted a whole food plant-based diet, but then we juxtapose that with our activity and our sleep and our rest and the power that it would have in transforming. What's the L stand for? Love, love, love. We all love love, don't we? And so one of the things I like to talk about is that when we get the tend to befriend, when we're around people, what that does, it's empowering to us. We get this release of oxytocin that begins to happen. And this is from the love hormone. And it's been shown in some studies to help change in the glucose metabolism, the insulin sensitivity, and increase the uptake of glucose into the cells. And so we know that there's power just by bonding, by loving. But here's one of the things: we anyone who's loved anybody or anything understands that love is no longer a noun, it is an action word. It means like forgiveness. Trust me, married 25 years. The wife has forgiven me plenty of times. And so we look at forgiveness. Research has showed us the fact that positive correlation, which means a relationship, it doesn't tell us cause and effect, but a relationship between diabetic symptoms in a tendency to being unforgiving, which means the less forgiving you are, the more likely you are to have higher blood sugars and have complications from it. And they found this correlation that was there, which was very, very interesting as they performed this research via interviews and assessment and measurements. Other studies told us that also with this month of being grateful, right? Giving thanks, being grateful. Studies have revealed and told us, reported out of Berkeley, is that grateful people, including those grateful to God, the higher being, have been shown to have 9 to 13% lower hemoglobin A1C, which is a reflection of how well your blood sugar is controlled. And this is significant. So we understand there's power in love, love as action and forgiveness and gratitude. Remember that during these moments of November when we're giving thanks. When we're giving thanks. Oh, what about the F? Well, we know it understands it's food, real food, plant-rich food, whole food, plant-based eating, no salt, no oil, and sugar, minimizing that as much as possible. That plant-based dietary intervention improves the beta cell. These are the things in insulin resistance that produce insulin as well as insulin resistance in overweight adults. And this was over a period of nearly 4 weeks 4 months that they looked at this and they found an improvement undergoing a low-fat plant-based dietary intake. Now, in this trial, what they did is they randomized individuals. Once again, they separated them out. A low-fat plant-based dietary intervention was found to reduce body weight, not surprising, reducing energy intake, right? Because the fiber is going to be on terms of the calorie density scale. It's going to be a lower calorie density. So that's not surprising. And it increased the metabolism, right? The body's having to work for this. And these were associated with what? Reductions in the hepatocellular and intramyocellular fat, which resulted in increased insulin sensitivity. There's power in the foods that we eat. Another study basically looked at the impact of the gut microbiome. Now we understand we're more bacterial DNA than we are actual human DNA. And what this study told us is the fact that a low-fat vegan or whole food plant-based diet, it induced significant changes in the gut microbiota, which was related to changes in weight, surprise to nobody, body composition, surprise to nobody. And guess what? Insulin sensitivity in overweight individuals. There's power in the foods that we choose. Another study, I tell you, there's so many. It's wonderful. I could stay here all day. That independent of body weight, the quality or the type of dietary fat and carbohydrate is more crucial than the quantity in determining diabetic risk. This means that the more, this is looking at the nurse's heart study, wasn't specifically randomized to whole food plant-based, but a dietary assessment. And so what they found is if you chose foods that were higher fiber content, that were plant sourced, that definitely improved and it really predicted and determined your risk. That's powerful. As we're making choices, every small amount matters towards an improved state of health. You do not have to live sick and die soon. Other studies told us, Anderson, no, what they did here, they said, we're going to lock you up inside of a ward, right? And we're going to go ahead and we're going to give you the food. We're going to measure it out, how much activity you do. And they took lean men with type 2 diabetes. That means they look good. You're like, you have diabetes? I'm surprised. Who were taking insulin and placed them on a high carb, right? Carbs are not bad. Garbage is bad. High carb, high fiber diet with less than 10% of the calories from fat, 70% from carbohydrates, and 65 grams of fiber per day. We understand we're fiber deficient in this country. And what they did was they made sure the body weights were stable by having the participants either eat more food or not if they lost weight. And so half of the participants were able to discontinue the insulin, half discontinuing insulin. I grew up with my dad while using insulin. And remember, they were able to significantly reduce their insulin overall. The average insulin dose decreased from 26 units on the baseline diet to 11 units on the high carbohydrate fat diet too as well. Another study, you talk about disparities, about the socioeconomic ladder. This looked at Latinos living inside of medically underserved areas, so socioeconomically distraught. And what they found is they found that individuals who were in the experimental group who were able to undergo the plant-based diet, they were able to lower their hemoglobin A1C over a course of 6 months. This is significant. I'll tell you, the source of it is really fiber. And when we look at the power of fiber, I'm gonna tell you, we hear about Ozempic and Wegovy and all these things, and we understand that fiber really does a very similar type effect. It increases the satiety hormone, signaling these hormones like GLP-1 and cholecystokinin and protein YY. All these variables across our entire system is where fiber begins to work. What about the intimacy of relationships? We understand that loneliness is a perilous condition, to be alone. And so the intimacy of being around other people that you trust and can put your guard down is so important. And so this stage told us that socially isolated people are more prone to have newly diagnosed and prevalent diabetes. And this is a study that was done in Germany. Another study, basically, and this is one I love so much. And this individual kind of explored what's called the social contagion theory, which means that good actions are contagious, and we're influenced by our friends and our constituents. And researchers, they've looked at this and found that friends' habits can influence our own, whether good or bad. And so, what an individual inspired by his grandmother's death from diabetes, Daniel Zugobi, he founded this microclinic international to promote healthy behaviors through small groups. And I'll tell you, it's so wonderful what he found. Their success in combating diabetes in other countries led them to try a similar approach inside of Kentucky, down south, where the rates of obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure were extremely high. Individuals undergoing this, they not only form close-knit relationships, but they begin to adopt healthier eating habits. And as a result, they were so impressive at the end of the time period. By the end of the 40-week period, 95% of participants showed significant improvements across multiple health indicators. We have to find our tribe. We have to find our group. We have to find where we belong, of individuals who share the desire to live a healthful life that's resourceful. We understand that when we do this, as well as engaging intimacy, can come from our pets. They cause us to exercise. They cause us to engage in social interactions. They help reduce our stress. And we understand they prevent the other effect, which is the blood sugar dropping too low. They're able to help us. It's powerful that's there. The S stands for sleep. Sleep, and studies have told us that the results of poor sleep quality is associated with increased hemoglobin A1C. We understand that there is a distinct relationship that's there, and that sleep duration and quality are predictive of poor control. You need your rest. The body needs time to recess and lower that stress hormone cascade. We have to learn to laugh in life. Humor, happiness, joy. These are the things that life is made of. And studies have shown us that when we engage in laughter with diabetes, they concluded in one particular study published about 20 some odd years ago, the present study elucidates the inhibitory effect of laughter has on the peripheral blood glucose levels. And it suggests the importance of daily opportunities for laughter in patients with diabetes. We have to laugh. We have to adopt all the principles of getting selfish. I want to tell you today, go ahead and get selfish this Thanksgiving. Go ahead and get selfish this November as we combat this idea of diabetes. I want to let you know that your DNA is not your destiny. And that's why when studies are looking at genetic risk, adherence to a healthy lifestyle and type 2 diabetes amongst individuals of nearly half a million individuals in China, the results were phenomenal. It showed that in those at high genetic risk of type 2 diabetes, 57% lower among participants with a healthy lifestyle than those with an unhealthy lifestyle. Lifestyle can change to sway the votes. It can move us away. It can lead us towards this idea of reversing. Some may say remission, but we understand there's power that's there. You have to continue to use your lifestyle as a form of therapy. And when you do, you're on the road to success. I want to tell you today, our job today is to get selfish. Once we achieve the goal of getting rid of diabetes, what's our purpose? What's our sole purpose? Our purpose at that point is what? To live a life of purpose. We get selfish to live a life of purpose. That's what it's about. And so I'm so happy to share this information with you today. I'll be so happy to share even more information with you about the concepts of getting selfish. I look forward to sharing more of that. I want to wish everyone a happy gratitude day. I want you to think about the things, 3 things every single day that you can be grateful for. Simple things: the air, health, uh, the awareness of your body if you're in pain, right? That your body has the ability to detect something that's wrong. That's powerful. That's something to be grateful for. That when you begin this process of gratitude, all of a sudden life begins to come into perspective. So I'm so pleased that you chose to spend a little bit of time with me today. Go ahead and submit your questions. Go on and log into the healthyheartdoc.org down the show notes. You can sign up for blogs. Continue to watch and support Chef AJ and these ventures. I look forward to connecting with you soon on the next go round. Thanks so much for spending time, and I look forward to seeing you again.